tell you, if you have an election that begins 2 months before an election and ends 2 months after an election, that's not an election. And currently, interestingly, is this battle in the Senate over the Save America Act, a law which would require voter ID nationally, voter ID or citizenship verification as well in order to newly register to vote. If you're already registered to vote, you're covered. And it's a quite a reasonable law given the overwhelming 85% public support for both provisions, voter ID and making sure that you're a citizen in order to vote. Because currently, there are at least 15 states, as best as I can recall. I think I put it up here. Yeah, these states have no voter ID. California, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Pennsylvania. They had voter ID, but the left-wing court there threw it out. Vermont, and of course here in Washington, D.C., it's not a state, but it's the nation's capital. No voter ID here, despite Republicans running things. And of course, voting by mail has no serious requirement in terms of ID verification in any state. So this is a real crisis. These are not small states, and they got to be brought into compliance with the wishes of the American people, because we have a right to ensure our elections are run fairly and cleanly. And voter ID is obviously almost makes it impossible to guard against in any serious way or even mild way voter fraud. Now, citizenship verification, we have tens of millions of non-citizens here in the United States. And if you're not a citizen, whether you're here legally or illegally, you're not supposed to be voting in federal elections. The only way to stop that, now that's the law, but the only way to check, well, there is no way to check under most. I think there's one state that may check for state variations of, it may have state requirements for state elections, but no state, as best I can recall, has any requirement to prove citizenship in order to register to vote for a federal election. The only thing you need to do when you register to vote is attest that you're a citizen under penalty of perjury, and obviously there's a criminal charge potentially there. But there's no check. And no one really looks at it, and the left objects to people looking at it or even asking questions about it. So Americans want people to assure officials that they're citizens before they're able to vote. It's simple. And if you're already registered, you're generally covered. The law also makes the process easier to remove non-citizens, so if there are current non-citizens on the rolls, it will be easier to remove them. So the Save America Act is a common sense piece of legislation that moves forward on a priority of the American people. There are a few, I can't think of any other public policy issue that has like an 80%, 85% type support. And that means that Democrats and Republicans. So the only people who support it are the left-wing lunatics who have utter contempt for elections, and they see it these rules as a way to stop them from stealing elections, and they want to be able to steal elections. And so, unfortunately, Democratic leaders in the Senate have been fighting tooth and nail, and John Thune has, at least, it's not the talking filibuster. I don't want to get into the whole filibuster issue, but he has allowed a more vigorous debate process that is lengthier. It's not the talking filibuster, but it's lengthier. And you can see the debate has forced the left to say, oh, we're not against voter ID, while voting against voter ID. I mean, for example, in the course of this debate, I think Senator Schmidt just put forward a straightforward voter ID law, a variation to the Save America Act. Democrats all voted it down. I don't know if they all voted it down, but it lost because of Democrat votes. So the filibuster continues, or the debate continues in the Senate, and I encourage you to call your senators, 202-224-3121, because this could go on for several more weeks, and it should go on for several more weeks. I think our elections are worth defending and talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks, maybe even months. Lord knows the Senate isn't doing much else. It's an election year. They're not going to be doing anything else. I exaggerate slightly, but I'm not, practically speaking, I'm generally right. And I know some of you may say, well, I live in California, or I live in Maryland, or I live in Illinois. My senators are Democrats. There's no reason to call them. That's not true. They track the volume of calls. And I tell you, calling your senators has an impact. Don't be told, and calling them repeatedly, because issues pop up. You should educate your senators as well. Be polite, be direct, share your views, but you are a citizen and you have, I would argue, an obligation in some respects to try to protect our country. And one way you can do it in terms of being vigilant is communicating with your elected officials. And so, yeah, call your California senators if you live in California, because they know how the calls are running. You know, and it's one thing to be against this, it's another thing to work hard against it, right? And if they're hearing a public outcry, they will, I shouldn't say it guarantees a certain result, but it may moderate views. Now, I'm not telling you what to think about it. I'm just sharing what my view is on the legislation, and I'm not telling you what to say. I mean, you could be listening to me and think, oh, Tom's all wet. I'm going to call them and tell them to vote against it. That's fine. God bless America. You've got that First Amendment right to petition your government. You know, we've got this, we hear about the First Amendment, right? And, you know, the media is obsessed with the First Amendment free speech side of it, right? Because that's what they do, they speak. But there are other aspects of the First Amendment. The religious clause, the religion clause, free exercise thereof, and the right to petition your government. Now, I want you to ask yourself, do you take that right seriously? How often do you petition your government? How often do you communicate with your elected officials? I'm not saying you're a terrible person if you don't, but I just ask you to, you know, it's our 250th anniversary of our nation's founding this year. And that First Amendment was a core issue, obviously, for the founders. That's why it's there in the Constitution. Yeah, remember our founders gave, what's the phrase? Their sacred honor, their fortunes, their lives for these freedoms. Are you exercising those freedoms? The right to petition our government, it's core to Judicial Watch's work. Our lawsuits are effectively a form of petitioning our government. We ask our government for records, ask them to do the right thing, and then we go to court. That's petitioning the government. So the Save America Act, in my view, is aptly named because, in my view, the left not only wants dirty elections or wants to be able to steal elections, they want to be able to end elections. You know, when you combine that with our litigation about whether Election Day means anything, I tell you, if you have an election that begins 2 months before an election and ends 2 months after an election, that's not an election. That's not an election in any meaningful way. We got to get back to that, because that's how we lose our country, I tell you, in terms of our ability to govern ourselves, because there's no way of tracking outcomes in any reliable way or guarding against fraud in any reliable way. If we have elections that last for months, no voter ID, no serious way of enforcing the prohibition of non-citizens voting. And that's why Judicial Watch has taken this issue of election integrity to heart, and as best as I can tell, we're the national leader on it. And I don't say that lightly. So again, call your senators at 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121.